Hey everyone, this is Mr. Zach, and welcome to our online children ministry program at Chinese Christian Union Church. As we are now in the new month of February, we will be beginning a new series called Freeze Frame. Not like that, but more like freezing for a picture. But for the next few weeks, we're going to be taking pictures of ourselves, virtually of course, and which will help tell our Bible story each week, in which we will be learning all about the miracles of Jesus and discover what it's like to have the power of Jesus in our lives. But before we get into today's lesson, let's look back to the very beginning of the big Bible story. Because even though the Bible is in many books and at many different time periods, it all comes together to make a big story that we will conclude by knowing what God's plan is for all of us. So how we're going to review our big Bible story is by doing some motions or kind of acting and holding them while I talk about them as well. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, what I want you guys to do for this one, and you also have to hold it, okay, or freeze and hold it, okay, because our series is called Freeze Frame. I want you guys to hold it, is to create a big circle with your arms above your head, okay, and hold that while I explain what that means. So, as this is just a review, you guys will see all these are familiar, but as this resembles kind of like the whole world, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And here we see how God created everything in like a whole big circle, okay? Now, I want you guys to pretend like you're about to pick a fruit. And maybe freeze like that, okay? Picking a fruit, and maybe it could be like that or something. But, God had a perfect relationship with the people he created. And these people were called Adam and Eve. But, they disobeyed God when they ate the fruit from the forbidden tree that they were not supposed to. And now, what I want you guys to do is act like you're super old, okay? And freeze. Good job. And hold that while I talk, okay? So, while sin separated us from God, God had a plan to fix things. God promised an old man named Abraham that he would have a special family that would give birth to a Savior. And that special family was called the Israelites. Now, I want you guys to pretend like you're really hot, okay? And freeze. But, after escaping slavery in Egypt, Moses led the Israelites through the hot desert and into a special land. That special land was called the Promised Land, or the land of Canaan. And now I want you to act like you're not listening. I don't really know how you do that, but maybe put your hands over your ears and freeze. Perfect. Maybe don't freeze with your hands super cover your ears. Maybe you can listen a little bit. But in the Promised Land, the Israelites stopped listening to God. So God sent special messengers to warn them and to tell them about the coming Savior. And these messengers were called prophets. And now our last one is to pretend you're like a baby, okay? And freeze. I'm not sure if all babies suck their thumbs, but some of them do. Most of them do. But, hundreds of years later, just as God has promised, a Savior was born to take away the sins of the world. And that Savior's name was Jesus. And that kind of brings us to where we are in the Bible. In the Bible, in the books of the Gospel, learning about Jesus' time on earth. And so here we begin with our story, with Jesus being an adult. Wherever Jesus went, huge crowds of people followed him. They knew there was something special about Jesus, and they wanted to hear everything he said. One day, when Jesus was preaching at the Sea of Galilee, the crowd of the people got so big that Jesus had to get into a boat so that everyone could see and hear him. Later that night, when Jesus was finished teaching, he wanted to get away from the crowd. So he said to his disciples, "Let's sail to the other side of the sea." It was a long way to the other side, and Jesus has been teaching all day long. And so this is kind of where our series of Freeze Frame is going to be, okay? So what I want you all to do now is, on the count of 3, is to make a face and imagine how you would how Jesus felt what Jesus felt. Okay, so I want on the count of three. I want you guys to make a face or kind of look like what Jesus felt. Imagine how he felt like. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Great job. Well, as you see here, I am yawning. Okay, and just like me being tired, Jesus was very tired as well. After that long day, he went to the back of the boat, laid down on it, and fell fast asleep. While Jesus was sleeping, a dark storm clouds began to form in the sky above. At first the storm was just small, but then it grew bigger and bigger and bigger. The winds began to pick up, the waves swept over the boat, and the rain soaked the disciples. Even though some of the disciples were fishermen, they had never been in a storm this big. Okay, so now I want you guys all to imagine and make a face of what the disciples' faces look like and hold it on the count of 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3. They were totally freaked out. As you can see, I guess I'm scared. But amazingly though, Jesus was still fast asleep in the back of the boat. So the disciples woke up and said, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." When Jesus woke up, you could tell that he wasn't worried. I want you all to make the face that you think Jesus was making as he spoke to the disciples on the count of 3. What was the face that Jesus was making? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Jesus was as calm and cool as could be. He said to his disciples, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and gave the storm one small command. He said, "Quiet, be still." At the command of Jesus, the winds died down, and the storms got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it stopped. The disciples couldn't believe it, and so with our last one, I want you guys to make a face. Imagine what the disciples looked like when they saw this miracle. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Exactly. They were amazed. They said to one another, they said, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and waves obey him." Can you guys believe that? With just one small command, quiet, be still, Jesus was able to stop the storms in its tracks. And it wasn't just an itty bitty storm with a few clouds and sprinkle of rain. It was a huge storm with lightning and winds and waves so big that they could sink a boat or even, kill people maybe. But some of the disciples, even though they were fishermen, they had been in big storms before and weren't afraid. But this storm was the, big storm of them all. And they were all afraid and shaking in their, sandals back then. But, do you know why they were afraid? They had forgotten that Jesus was with them. If they have hung on to Jesus, they could have sailed through the storm without falling into fear. And, to explain kind of what that means of holding on to Jesus, let me explain it so you guys can understand. Okay, I wish I could do this activity with you guys in person because it would make it a lot more sense. But I'm going to use some pictures to help explain it, but also you guys can imagine and also kind of do it with yourself as well, okay? So imagine this. The chair that you're sitting on is peace, okay? So the chair that you're sitting on is resembling peace, okay? And the floor around you is fear, okay? What I need you all to do is to sit upon peace without falling into fear, okay? Pretty easy, right? I'm sure none of you guys fell out of your chair right because, everything is calm. You're not going to fall off your chair into fear because it's easy. You're at peace because nothing's bothering you, and you won't fall into fear because you're okay. But what if storms started to form around you? Not actually storms with water and everything, but storms, of struggles, storms of challenges that could happen in your life. A storm could be something like your parents getting divorced. Maybe another thing could be moving far away from your friends and family and, the area that you live. Or maybe your grandparents are really, really sick. Those are some storms and challenges that could be storms. So what if the storm started to shake you? Maybe that chair you're on is starting to shake. Maybe someone or something is shaking you around. Maybe they will start to push you. Maybe they'll push you off. They'll try to push you off that chair of peace. Or maybe they'll even pull you, and they can pull you off. And if I said you couldn't use your hands to grab onto the chair, you'll probably fall off that chair, and you would fall into fear, which means most people they would get scared and fall into fear. But what I mean to hold on to Jesus is this. If we had to do this whole thing again, is sit back on our chair of peace and the floor is fear around us. This time we're going to be holding on to something, or having something hold on to us as well. For this example, we'll use something to hold us. Pretend you tie a rope around the chair so you can't fall off, you can't get pulled off, and you can't be shaken off as well. And that's what it is like as well. If we hang on to Jesus and hold on to Him, we can sail through the storm without falling into fear. Though it would still be really difficult, when we are with Jesus and hang on to Him, we cannot fall into fear, and we will be at peace. So whenever there's a storm in our life, whenever something bad happens, we don't need to be afraid, because Jesus is near. And that's what our Bible verse for today says, from Lamentations chapter 3 verses 57, which says, "You came near when I called out to you. You said, 'Do not be afraid.'" Lamentations chapter 3 verse 57. When something bad happens, we can call out to Jesus. He'll come near to us and say, "Do not be afraid." He'll keep us from falling into fear. I want you guys to think about if you guys have any storms in your life right now. Has something bad happened that makes you feel afraid or scared or sad? Well, that's okay. Remember to bring it to Jesus, and bring it to Jesus as Jesus helps us sail through those storms. Storms of life or storms of trials. And with that, we will be able to live with Jesus without falling into fear. We don't need to be afraid. We just need to hold on to Jesus. So remember, guys, hold on to Jesus and don't be afraid. I'll see you guys around.